Okay, that should be on. Well, happy Easter Sunday, everybody. Yeah. I thought it was just 80. I thought it was 80 degrees yesterday. The whole saying is around here, if you don't like the weather, Steve, just wait till tomorrow.
They say that in Michigan also.
I don't doubt that.
I've heard you let people say that.
But I did notice that Minnesota's had a winter storm. When I was watching, 6 inches of snow, and it was pretty cold. We actually, Penny and I, along with our family, both daughters and their family, we've been to St. Louis. We just went for a 2-day trip. Spent Friday night there. But one of the things that we noticed en route, especially on Friday when we were going, a number of motor homes and RV campers that we passed, and they all had Minnesota and Iowa on the license plate. They'd been down south all winter long. Yeah, and they were on. March had come to an end, and they were headed back. They were headed back home. It wasn't young folks either. Penny and I see that a little bit when we go down the Gulf Shores. We've been doing that for a few years in February. It's a really neat campground down there, and about 490 sites, I think. And I wouldn't doubt if at least half of them aren't either Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan.
Snowbirds.
Yep, snowbirds. That's right. And if you talk to them, they all say, "Yeah, we love it down here. We came down here 10 years ago, and now we come every year." They're getting away from that cold winter. All right, we're going to talk about our lesson today is be the light. And as I said already, we've got scriptures to read from 3 different New Testament books, and especially I think the verse in Matthew we're probably pretty familiar with. There's not anything that we haven't heard before. So I guess we'll start out and try to read the verses. So we're just going to read the first. We'll do it a section at a time, though. And we'll read this first section, and then we'll talk about it. Paul is writing, of course, to this Philippian church. "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for His good pleasure. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine, holding fast the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain or labored in vain. Yes, and if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad. For the same reason, you also be glad." Paul picks up, or our lesson today actually picks up right where you left off last Sunday morning. It was sorry that we missed that lesson. I was preaching at Bethel last Sunday, which I really enjoyed, on humility. And Jesus was given, really was humble in those. Jesus as well, and not about him being humble though, but about him being the light that is come into the world. When in the Bible, when we're talking about light or we're talking about darkness, different levels of light maybe, what are we really talking about? How does the Bible use those terms? Jesus is the light of the world, meaning what, Rick? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing. What does light represent in our Bibles? Something good, something bad? It's good, isn't it? Light is a good thing. Obviously, the dark, the nighttime in our world has its purpose. And when we rest, we kind of don't want all that light present. But, you know, different levels of light and different. And I think in the Bible, and Jesus is good and right and pure. We don't think about, you know, when the sun goes down, we come from at night. Yeah, we've got the moon, and we have the stars, and so and that varies obviously, but we've all probably been in those places where there is almost no light at all. And when we're in those places, that's a totally different situation, isn't it? That's when you can't see. We use the expression, you know, I can't see my hand in front of my face. That's darkness, and we don't. I don't think, for the most part, we don't enjoy that kind of darkness. And I think that's more indicating what the Bible's talking about when it uses that word darkness. The world is a dark place in those kinds of symbolic ways. There's a lot of evil. There's a lot of bad out there in the world. But there's hopefully some good in the world too. And as we read in this passage that we just read, Paul is encouraging these Philippians to be what? Light or darkness? He's encouraging them to be light. Just a few things that are said. The 12th verse, Paul admonishes them to be being the people that they ought to be, not just when he's present, but also when he is absent. I couldn't help but think about growing up and going to school at Farmington. You know, when we're all sitting in class and the teacher's standing up there in front of us, Michelle, and she's looking out over the classroom talking, you know, everybody's kind of sitting up acting like they're paying attention, trying to do what they're supposed to do. Whatever happened in the classroom sometimes when the teacher stepped out for a few minutes? Yeah, stuff might start breaking out a little bit. You know, it's like, hey, nobody sees us now. We can do what we want to. Same thing. I think with our parents. You know, if they're not around, we may act one way, but if they're around, we may act another. And Paul is just making the point that, hey, you need to be an example. You need to be a light in the world. And whether I'm present, talking to you, working with you, encouraging, or whether I'm not present with you at all, then you need to be the same people. And we've heard that phrase there, working out your own salvation with fear and trembling. What does that mean to you? What do you think about when you hear that? Are we working out our own salvation with fear and trembling? Can you work your way into heaven? No. So, what are you going to do with this verse here then? I agree with you. I don't think we can either. We understand the role of grace. We understand that without Jesus, it's impossible. But do we have a responsibility in all this? Yes, we do, don't we? So, Paul seems to be indicating that in this. It's not just something that Jesus did, God did through Jesus, although that's how we are saved, all right. Couldn't be saved without it. We'd have absolutely no hope without it. And yet, Paul is saying, well, you've got a role too. Why with fear and trembling? That kind of sounds like we're miserable. Have you ever obeyed somebody else in your life or tried to please somebody else because you were afraid of them? Yeah, that's not a very comfortable position to be in, is it? All right, so we got to figure, what does this verse mean to you? What does it mean to us? Should we wake up every morning and be thinking, oh Lord, please don't smite me today. I better do this. I better do that. I don't think that sounds like the Christian life either. What's another meaning of the word fear besides being afraid of? Okay. The Bible talks a great deal about the fear of the Lord. And I think it's a connotation to it. To fear God is, I would say there's probably some real fear in it, because when I read in the Bible, anytime people thought they had some kind of meeting or God had been near, what's their reaction? You remember any of the stories? God's on Mount Sinai.
They were scared that time.
You better believe they were. God was at Sinai, and what'd they tell Moses? You go talk to him. We are afraid. They ran away from that mountain. They didn't want any part of it. There's some times in the old, I can't remember exactly how the story goes, but there is a husband and a wife, an old couple, and the Lord appears to them in the form of an angel, and he does some the food on the rock and consumes it, and then the angel's gone. You know what the man says? We've seen God and we're not dead yet. Can't believe it. You know, we can't. They were so moved by that experience. God had been present. But it's not just a respect, a deep respect that seems to have some kind of understanding of who God is. And, well, to show that it's not just a bad thing, what is the famous statement of Solomon in Ecclesiastes 12:13? What is the whole duty of man? He says. Fear God and keep His commandments. You're exactly right, Dodie. It's obey, but I wanted that word fear to be used. Yeah. So God says we are to fear Him, and I think that's why Paul can appropriately or rightly use this word we're going to live for the Lord, then we've got. And in that respect, obviously, there's going to be this feeling of our inferiority and His greatness and His power. You know, we're humble. Last week's lesson was about humility for the Lord. Because we are not. We approach His greatness. I don't want us to think that to work out our salvation because we're wringing our hands all the time and we're afraid and, oh me, what is it God wants me to do today? I've got to figure it out. That's misery. That doesn't sound like a life of peace and comfort. But I think Paul's just saying attitude's got to be right. And that of God in our lives to live the Lord wants us to live. The next verse, I just wanted to, I don't know for sure, but I want to see if you have an opinion. It is God who works in you. Okay, we believe that God works in people. But what does it say? Both to will and to do for His good pleasure. I think I have an understanding of what that means. The to do, if it just said to do His good pleasure, it's like us, if we will allow Him to do the work that He has for us to do. Before do. He's also help us determine our will. What's that idea? To me, it's not just that we're going to try to live for Him, but Miss Anita, we want to. You understand? You know, we don't always do our own will. Sometimes, Debbie, I really intended to do something. I wanted to do something. It was right and good, and I still didn't get it done, right? But I had the desire to. But we know that God doesn't just want us to be people who obey His will, but where does He want that obedience to come from? From a desire within us. Yeah, in our own hearts. And so God, I think, doesn't just work in our lives and use us to do the things that He wants us to. He even works in our lives, maybe first, to help change us on the inside so that we want to do it.
And there's things that happen to us in our life that, for me, it's like I don't understand why am I having to suffer because of something someone else did.
Right.
But because of my love for God, and I've read the words, and that's what it means when I read it, and I've asked others, but I have to go with my understanding.
Right.
So, that I don't do because my love of God is great. Even though I don't understand maybe why I have to live this way.
Right. I think that's a good attitude to have, Debbie. That just says that, hey, the Lord's way is right and it's good, and I'm going to submit to it. I want to live by His will for me and trust in Him. And try to be whoever He wants me to be right now in this situation. The next kind of goes, I think, a little bit with last week's lesson. Don't be complaining and disputing so that we can become harmless and blameless. And then he makes this statement that we can be children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. Todd Templeton Todd, you agree with that statement I just read? Did you hear what I said? That we live in a crooked and perverse generation? Because sometimes how do you describe this world that we live in? I hear Todd, I'll say, like, it's a dark world out there. It's a dark world out there, isn't it? Yes, it is.
You know, Stan, I can remember my grandfather when I was younger. Remember my grandfather asking my mother, why in the world you want to raise kids in today's society? That was 60 years ago.
Well, I think they were right to be talking about it then. We're right to be talking about it today. But you know what? Paul was telling those people 2,000 years ago about that it was the same way then too. Now, there might be specific stuff going on, I'm sure. But the fact of the matter is, the world has been dark ever since when? Ever since man started making decisions on his own and he messed up. And sin was committed. In fact, there was a time when the world got so dark that what did God do? Started over. He brought a great flood. The world is a perverted, wicked place.